Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive with us. Today, we're going way back to ancient Rome, specifically their mythology.
Ah, yes. The myths and legends of the Romans.
Right. And you know we love a good visual, so we found this really cool Roman god family tree.
Sounds interesting.
It is, it is. Now,
Like-
full disclosure. The source says it's not like a totally complete tree, more like a greatest hits of the major Roman gods and goddesses.
Focusing on the ones with those clear links to Greek mythology. Makes sense.
Exactly, exactly. But even with just that limited scope, it's pretty amazing what you can learn about these figures, like what their roles were, you know?
And maybe even how those roles reflect back on Roman society itself.
Oh, for
right.
sure, for sure.
Data on the screen, numbers come alive. Male, female flows where the patterns thrive. Visual charts, public colors unify. Gender decoded, bringing truth to light. Small drum fill. We break it down, real talk. Trends unveiling, facts from every block. Here's your insight, watch the data glide. Gender decoded, let the beats collide.
All right, strap in, everybody. Today, we're diving deep into Roman mythology, but with a twist.
A twist.
Yeah, we're not just, running down the usual names and dates.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's the twist?
Well, our source is an analysis of a Roman god family tree image. And get this, it really dives into the gender dynamics, among the gods and goddesses.
Oh, that's fascinating. Gender roles in Roman mythology are always a rich topic.
Totally. So basically, the source counted 44 deities on this family tree.
Okay.
26 male gods and 18 female goddesses. Almost a 3.2 ratio.
Interesting.
Honestly, I was expecting a way bigger gap. What do you think?
It's tempting to just look at the numbers, right, and assume it's all about some power imbalance, but I think there's more to it.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It's never that simple.
Right. We need to look at what kind of powers these deities have, not just how many there are.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's start with the guys. Like, a lot of them are all about power, rulers, warriors, those big forces of nature, Jupiter, Mars, Neptune, that whole, alpha male archetype.
You're on to something there. Think about Jupiter, for example. He's got the thunderbolts, right? The king of the gods. That idea of order and control, but also fear.
Right. Jupiter is definitely a force to be reckoned with.
Exactly. And it connects back to Roman history and anxieties. They were constantly worried about rebellion, both within Rome and from the people they'd conquered.
Oh, I see. So Jupiter's power is about more than just being king of the gods. It's about this need for order and control that the Romans themselves felt. Like they needed that strong figure to hold everything together.
Precisely. And it's not like the male gods were all powerful either. Even Jupiter, with all his might, was still subject to fate. Remember the 3 fates?
Oh yeah, the fates, powerful ladies.
Exactly. So even in these seemingly straightforward power dynamics, there's nuance, checks and balances.
Okay, this is getting interesting. So it's not just male gods equal power, female goddesses equal something else. There's way more to it. So what about the goddesses then? The source points out that yes, some are consorts, but a lot of them have their own powerful roles too.
Absolutely. Look at Minerva, for example.
Yeah.
Goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare.
Right. Minerva is no pushover.
She's not just sitting on the sidelines. She's actively involved in shaping outcomes, both on the battlefield and in matters of intellect.
That's true. And what about Diana?
Ah, Diana. Fiercely independent, mistress of the hunt and the moon. She's connected to the wildness of nature, but also to childbirth, which was vital for Roman society, to keep things going.
It's funny. I used to think of those goddesses as, secondary figures.
Yeah.
But the more we talk about it, the more I see how central they were.
Oh, absolutely. And then there's Venus. You might think, oh, she's just the goddess of beauty. But think about the power beauty had in Roman culture, in their art, their poetry, their social interactions.
Wow. Yeah. Beauty was a big deal in ancient Rome.
Huge. Venus isn't just about looks. She represents a force that shapes desire, alliances, even conflict.
Okay, you're blowing my mind here. These goddesses were way more than just pretty faces. They were intertwined with Roman life on so many levels.
Exactly. And here's where it gets even more fascinating. Think about Vesta for a moment.
Vesta, okay.
She's often depicted as this veiled figure tending the sacred flame. You might think she's passive, but that flame, the sacerdotes, represented the heart of Rome, the continuity of the state.
Oh, wow, that's powerful. So she's not just about home and hearth, but about what it meant to be Roman.
Exactly. And her priestesses, the Vestal Virgins,
Yeah, the Vestals.
they held a unique position. Sworn to celibacy, their lives were dedicated to maintaining that sacred flame. Their purity was seen as vital to Rome's well-being. Can you imagine the respect and influence they must have had?
That's incredible. So even though Roman society was definitely patriarchal, right, there was this recognition that certain domains, certain powers were inherently feminine and essential. Like they needed these goddesses to keep things running smoothly.
Right. It really makes you question those easy assumptions about power. If these goddesses were so vital, and by extension, the women who served them, can we really say they were as subordinate as we might think?
That's such a good point. So if these powerful goddesses were like a counterbalance to the dominant male figures, how did that actually play out in everyday Roman life? Were there tensions, clashes? I'm dying to know more.
Well, to answer those questions, we need to shift our focus from the celestial family tree to the earthly realm. In part 2 of our deep dive, we'll explore how these gods and goddesses were worshipped in practice, through rituals, festivals, and everyday life for the Roman people.
Ooh, okay, I can't wait. Okay, so we've seen that the Roman god family tree, it's more complex than it looks at first glance, but it is still like just a family tree. How did those dynamics actually play out in the lives of, regular Romans?
That's a great question, because Roman religion wasn't just about those big-name deities and their cosmic dramas, It was woven into everyday life, and that's where things get even more interesting when you look at gender roles.
So it's not all Jupiter, like, throwing lightning bolts and calling the shots?
Yeah.
What else was happening?
Well, remember, the Roman Empire was vast, right? Huge.
Yeah.
Exactly. And they incorporated all sorts of different beliefs and practices. Like, think about it. If you're a farmer in, say, rural Gaul, you're probably less worried about Jupiter's decrees than, whether your crops are going to grow.
That makes sense. So who are these farmers praying to? Give me some names.
Well, someone like Silvanus, for example.
Silvanus. Oh.
He's a god of woods and fields, often depicted as this rustic figure, more like a shepherd than a king.
Oh, interesting. So not exactly the Olympian type hanging out on a mountaintop.
No, not at all. He's connected to the practical side of nature, protecting livestock, ensuring good harvests, representing the wildness of the forest.
Okay, so a very down-to-earth kind of god.
Exactly. And alongside Silvanus, you have the nymphs.
Oh, the nymphs.
You mentioned earlier picturing them as these beautiful maidens dancing in the forest.
Yeah, I did.
And that imagery is definitely there, but they weren't just pretty faces,
Oh, I'm all ears. Tell me more about these nymphs.
They were believed to inhabit specific places, like springs, groves, caves, and they had power over those domains.
So they were kind of like the local representatives of nature's power.
Exactly.
Right.
The ones you had to deal with on a daily basis. They could influence fertility, bring abundance, but they could also withhold it, causing droughts or other misfortunes.
So it was important to stay on their good side.
Right. And I think it's significant that these figures, who were so tied to the land, were often female. It suggests a different way of understanding the relationship between humans and nature. Less about dominance and control, and more about respect, reciprocity.
That's fascinating. So even within that patriarchal structure of Roman society, there were these pockets where feminine power was acknowledged, even revered.
It seems that way. And this wasn't just limited to rural areas either. Remember, the Romans were masters of syncretism?
Syncretism?
Yeah, blending different religious traditions as their empire expanded.
Oh, right. Right, they were conquering all sorts of different cultures with their own gods and goddesses.
Exactly. And rather than trying to completely erase those local beliefs, they often incorporated them into their own pantheon. A great example of this is the Egyptian goddess Isis.
Oh, Isis. Yeah, she became super popular in Roman times, right?
She did.
Wasn't she associated with magic and healing and stuff?
Exactly, and motherhood and protection. The Romans saw parallels between Isis and some of their own goddesses, like Ceres, Proserpina, even Juno. They incorporated her worship, fitting her into their existing religious framework.
So how did all this mixing and matching of gods and goddesses affect the gender dynamics we've been talking about? Did it, shake things up at all?
It definitely adds another layer of complexity. On the one hand, you have Isis, who, despite her powerful role in Egyptian mythology, was often depicted as this devoted wife and mother within the Roman context.
So, in a way, that reinforced traditional Roman ideas about women's roles.
You could say that, but it's not that straightforward. Remember, Isis is also the goddess who defied Set, right, to resurrect her husband, Osiris. She's a powerful sorceress, a protector.
Oh, right. She's got that fierce, independent side, too.
Exactly. And I think this highlights that duality that was often present in these goddess figures. Both in Roman and foreign traditions, they could embody nurturing qualities and assertive qualities, strength and vulnerability. And I think that really resonated with people.
It's like they were acknowledging that women and, feminine power wasn't this one-dimensional thing. It was multifaceted.
Right. And it's important to remember that syncretism wasn't just a top-down phenomenon. Every day, Romans were actively shaping these blended traditions, adapting them to their own needs and beliefs.
So it wasn't just the elite imposing their interpretations. It was more organic.
Exactly. And that makes it even more fascinating to try and understand how all these different layers, the Olympian gods, the local deities, the foreign influences, how they all came together to shape people's experiences and ultimately their ideas about gender.
Okay, my brain is officially exploding. We've gone from this seemingly simple family tree to this vast, dynamic, multicultural religious landscape.
It really is. And to truly appreciate those complexities, we need to go beyond the myths and the names. We need to look at how Roman religion was lived, experienced, embodied.
You mean like what did people actually do to honor these gods and goddesses?
Exactly. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll delve into the world of Roman rituals and festivals. Those public expressions of faith where these divine gender dynamics really come to life. Get ready for some togas and processions.
I can't wait. This is getting better and better. All right, welcome back to our deep dive into the Roman god family tree. We've covered a lot of ground, haven't we?
We have. Olympians, local deities, syncretism. It's been a whirlwind tour.
It really has. But now I want to get into the nitty-gritty. How did this all play out in practice? Roman religion wasn't just about, beliefs and myths, right? It was about what people actually did.
Absolutely. Rituals, festivals, the everyday ways people connected with the divine. That's where it gets really interesting, especially when we're talking about gender dynamics.
Okay, so let's talk rituals. Were there specific roles for men and women? Did they reflect those gender dynamics we've been discussing?
Oh, definitely. Roman rituals were very structured, very specific. And as you might expect, yeah, there was a hierarchy involved.
So it wasn't just like anyone could show up and offer a sacrifice to, whoever they felt like.
Not quite. The big players were the priests, and those positions were almost always held by men. They were seen as the intermediaries between the gods and the people, the ones responsible for performing the rituals correctly, to ensure divine favor.
Okay, so that patriarchal structure was definitely there, even in the sacred realm. But that doesn't mean women were totally excluded, right?
Right. We already talked about the Vestal Virgins, for example. They had a unique and very important position, remember. Dedicated to Vesta, maintaining that sacred flame, essential for the well-being of Rome.
It's amazing when you think about it, the dedication it took to live that life, Celibacy, ritual service. What do you think those women were like?
That's a question for the ages. But beyond the Vestals, women played active roles in a lot of religious contexts. Think about household rituals, for instance, especially those related to childbirth, marriage, death, big life events.
Oh, right. Makes sense.
And women were often the ones leading those rituals, offering prayers, sacrifices, to goddesses like Juno, who protected marriage, or Diana associated with childbirth. It was a whole domestic sphere of religious practice.
So it's like they acknowledged that certain aspects of life, certain powers, were just inherently feminine, right?
Yeah.
And needed to be addressed through these female-led rituals.
It does seem that way. And it wasn't just about appeasement. Remember, the Romans believed the gods were actively involved in their lives, influencing everything from the harvest to battles. So keeping those goddesses who oversaw these domestic spheres happy, well, that was crucial.
Yeah, you don't want to get on their bad side. Okay, so we've got priests, the Vestals, women leading those household rituals. What about those big public festivals? I bet those were something else.
Oh, they were. And those festivals are another great example of how gender dynamics played out. Some festivals were just for men or women, while others were open to everyone.
Give me some examples. I'm picturing, like, togas and parades.
Think about the Lupercalia.
Lupercalia, okay.
A big fertility festival in February, lots of wild rituals, animal sacrifices, purification, all performed by male priests, to ensure prosperity and abundance for the coming year.
Sounds intense.
It was. But then you have festivals like the Bona Dea, which was exclusively for women, honoring a goddess of fertility, healing, and protection.
Wow, so even in these public celebrations, there were spaces carved out specifically for men and women to honor their respective deities and roles.
Exactly. And remember, these festivals weren't just about, religious observance. There were social events, too. A chance for communities to come together, reinforce shared values, and, just let loose a little.
So we're seeing these layers of meaning and purpose in every part of Roman religion. It's not just about who's at the top of the family tree. It's about how those divine figures were actually venerated, how their powers were accessed in everyday life.
Exactly. And it wasn't a static system either. These rituals and festivals changed over time, reflecting evolving social norms.
So by studying these practices, we're not just learning about ancient rituals, we're getting a glimpse into how people actually lived, thought, and interacted with each other.
It's a window into the past. It reminds us that even in a society as seemingly structured as ancient Rome, there were always complexities, contradictions, and, that constant push and pull between different ideas and values.
Well, folks, that's our deep dive into the Roman god family tree. From those all-powerful Olympian figures to local deities, and that fascinating blend of cultures that shaped Roman religious life. We've seen how those dynamics played out in practice, through the rituals and festivals that brought those gods and goddesses to life.
And I hope it's inspired you to learn even more.
Absolutely. This is just one interpretation, one perspective on a vast and complex world. So keep exploring, keep asking those questions, and keep diving deep. Until next time.